you're in the right place. This is the Eatfluencer Podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Maggie Landes. Together, we are going to unpack everything about eating and discover the what, when, and how that will let you lead your best life. This is not your doctor's conversation about nutrition. Today is when you can start to love eating again. Let food be food and you be you. Get ready to get eatfluenced. Hi, and welcome back to the Eatfluencer Podcast. I'm your host, Maggie Landes. I'm so glad that you've joined me today. If you're a new listener, or if you're one of my returning listeners and you're back for some more of this non-diet conversation. That's what we do here. I'm a board-certified physician, a public health nutritionist, and an anti-diet wellness expert. And what I do here, both in my podcast, my speaking platforms, and my coaching program, is help women who are exasperated with the chronic diet overwhelm and get them out of that cycle of yo-yo dieting so that they can live more contently in a non-diet approach to eating. So that is what I'm doing here, and I'm glad you're here to learn from me. And as always, if you have questions or additional thoughts about this, I would love for you to email me or direct message me on social media. That not only helps me know what is of value to you, but it also helps me create some ideas for future podcasts. I want to make sure I'm talking about what you want to hear. So today you're listening to episode 22, which I've called, Are You Stressed About Stress Eating? And the whole idea of stress eating, when I say that, I know it kind of immediately gives you this, like gut reflex, like it's just such a negative feeling when you talk about stress eating. It's a little bit of a chicken and the egg type phenomena, though, because we're not really sure. Are we talking about stress eating, like eating in response to stress? Or are we talking about eating stress and the stress that comes as a response to our eating choices? Well, what we're going to go over today is how these two ideas are very tightly related to each other. And I'm also going to leave you with some ideas on how to start sorting this out in your own head and how to really come to terms with what things are in your control to change and which things are not, so that you don't have that kind of awful tight knot in your stomach with stress-related eating or eating-related stress all of the time. I would have to say that's probably one of the top definitely one of the top things that people come and talk to me about. The first one probably is weight loss, because everybody wants to lose weight and has been made to feel like they need to lose weight. But after that, I would say emotional eating and stress eating are probably tied for second place. So this is an important issue to talk about, and I'm glad you're here today and have interest in learning about this. So what we have to understand is, when we're stressed about something, is that response to the stress eating because we're using it to calm our nerves, we're using it to numb a negative emotion? Is it as a distraction because we are overwhelmed with what we have to do, or the sort of busyness or the chaos of the moment? Is it really because we're more hungry, because we have physical stress, we have more, real physical energy requirements because of something we're doing? Is it a matter of comforting? Is it a connection thing that brings us out of a isolating or lonely situation? There's a lot of emotions that are involved in this. So when, we say stress, that's a pretty big term that can mean different things to everybody. And so hence the response to stress in terms of eating is, has a different meaning for everybody too. But what we're really talking about, and what I think people mean to say, is eating in response to an emotion that feels, out of control and, quote, bad. And that's sort of what I think makes that negative connotation so thick with most people, is because they feel like ashamed that they're eating in response to stress. Like that's not a normal response. They should have more willpower, more control. They should know better. That's a lot of what people will say to me. And I know that because that's how I thought for a really long time too, that this was something 100% in my control. And if I couldn't 100% control it, then I was the problem. But see, that's where this whole thing comes from, is diet culture programming or diet culture messaging. And I hope you understand when I say that, I'm not saying diet like a branded capital D diet plan. If you have listened to my podcast before, you know that I use this term diet culture all the time. And what I'm referring to is the systematic set of sort of social beliefs that tell us we need to restrict what we eat. We need to micromanage our food. We need to always be pursuing weight loss and smallness. That's what I'm saying. And so I just wanted to clear that up for those of you that may be listening to this for the first time. But the diet culture messaging that I just defined really doubles down on this problem, because now we have the eating response to our stress, which is not in our control. And then because of our eating choices, we feel more stress. So you can see how real quick this turns into what we call a negative, sort of feedback loop. And one is going to go to the other, is going to make the other worse, which makes the other worse. And you end up in this spin cycle, for lack of a better term, that really just flat out makes us crazy and feel like we are out of control around food. And we're really not. Honestly, the body has a reason for everything that it does. Every reaction and interaction in the body is purposefully designed. There is not haphazard things going on. So we need to trust that the body is producing these responses for a reason. And this is super interesting, but restriction causes part of the stress. And so your dieting and restrictive eating is actually making you more stressed about eating. I mean, obviously that goes without saying. That's why you're probably listening to this podcast, because you're burnt out and fed up and confused and just about over it. But this is built into our psychology. And that's what I'm saying, is it's not you incapable of following a set of food rules. This is your body, responding to restriction. So have you ever seen you can Google it and look for a little video clip. They've done lots of psychology experiments where they take, preschool age kids and put them in a room. Like these are probably like maybe 3-year-olds or something. Put them in an exam room with like a one-way mirror, and they put a cupcake on the table or something and tell the little kid, hey, your mom's going to step out for just a second. She needs to go make a phone call, or they make some excuse. So you can play with all the toys in here, but don't touch the cupcake until she gets back. And then when she comes back, you guys can share the cupcake or something, something to that effect. It's a cookie or something super appealing to a kid or an adult for that matter. And what happens is they watch these kids, and because they have made something off limits, the kid is like laser focused on it. They are like touching it, poking at it, smelling it. They pick it up, they put it down, and eventually some of the kids will eat it, or they'll stick their finger in the side of it and then try to cover it up or something. So that's, they're not doing that to sort of undo a psychology experiment. They're not mature enough to manipulate the situation. They are just responding to that primitive human brain that looks for things that are restricted. That's just how we we are. If there's a threat of scarcity, your brain is laser focused on finding it because it had to be a billion jillion years ago when cavemen were having to risk their lives to find food and etc. They had to know where things were, and if there was going to be scarcity, they had to try to solve that problem before it became life threatening. And that's built into our nervous system. So it's no different than a caveman, than a 3-year-old locked in a psychology experiment with a cupcake, or you on your diet. When you say that you're never ever going to eat X food or X food group, or you're never ever ever going to eat after a certain time, or whatever absolute rigid rule you put on yourself, that is just producing a stress response. And they've done a lot of research about dieting behavior and dieters and what happens to their stress hormones, their cortisol level, their blood sugar, or things like that, that are a physiologic outcome of this stress. And interestingly, the dieters seem to have a appetite that is based on conscious sort of cortical functioning, which makes sense, right? Because you're telling yourself when you can eat, how much you can eat. It's all like real calculated. The whole experience is not a emotional, deep in the brain thing. It's like a giant algebra problem that you have to solve 5 times a day. So when there's stress, the body is basically looking for food, and the appetite is increased because there's this response to cortisol, which is huge and very amplified in dieters. But the interesting thing is that the intuitive eaters, people that eat in response to their physical hunger cues, who are tuned into their body's physical and emotional needs a little more readily, when they have a stress event, they seem to be able to adapt to it, and the appetite is not so much affected, and to the point where they don't seem to have these giant swings in cortisol. And literally that's just expressing the fact that just to say it another way, to say it in a more simple way, dieters are like living on the edge of this catastrophic stress response all the time. And that's what you feel when you're anxious about planning your meal, when you're nervous about eating, when you don't know the ingredients, when you're taking so long to grocery shop because you're, having to scrutinize every single label. You're just on that edge of always being stressed out to the max. Whereas intuitive eaters, it's more relaxed. And this is where the confusion comes in, because people learning about intuitive eating think, oh yeah, relaxed. Well, you're just going to, eat sleeves and sleeves of Thin Mints, and there's no rules, and all the foods are equal, and, that kind of ignorant nonsense. That's not it at all. That's not at all what intuitive eating is about. That's not what I'm advocating for, or what anybody who knows about intuitive eating is advocating for. But there is some realism in the fact that the intuitive eaters' stress mechanisms in their body are not coupled with the idea of food so tightly. So that when they have stress responses in, let me just say this, when they have stress producing events in their life, which they're going to, all of us have stress in our life, the immediate response in their body is not these huge labile swings of cortisol to which they feel they have to feed with food. The stress coping skills are found in other ways besides appetite and food. And it's something that's happening on a subconscious and a real biological level. This is not them just being smarter, more willful people or anything like that. It's really, the human design. So that's That's so cool to me that the brain is that nuanced and has reasons for all these responses. So, what we want to do is try to get ourselves out of the dieting so that we're not constantly living on that edge of crazy town and move into the area of intuitive eating where we are recognizing that our body needs nourishing food, but every single last decision is not like teetering on this precipice of a total, you know, stressful meltdown inside, if that makes any sense. That may have not been the most articulate way to say that, but I think y'all know what I mean and what I say. I'm probably describing a lot of feelings that you have around food. So, really what it is the response to stress is not something we can control. Your body is going to respond a certain way to a stressful, initiating event. But then there's this cycle between the stress and the eating. And so it's really our beliefs about the eating that create the impact of the stress response. So the stress response is, metabolic and physiological. We can't do much about that, but what we can do is change our beliefs about the eating, because that's where the damage occurs. And food is not the problem. Food is neutral, and that's one of the principles of intuitive eating. I'll sort of open that up in another podcast, but food is just a thing. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just a non-living group of nutrient components, and it's just an inanimate object. And our beliefs that we superimpose on the food, and this sort of personifying of the food as having morality and good and bad qualities, and being all these things that are like almost human in nature, we're just projecting onto the food, because the food is just a thing. The food is no different than a set of keys or a shoe or a phone or a lamp. I mean, it's just an inanimate object. But the thoughts about it are not neutral. So what we need to do is change what we can change. So here's some of our beliefs about eating that are wrecking us, is that we have labeled everything good or bad, right? So we have good food, we have bad food, we have junk food, we have healthy food, we have clean food, we have, I don't know what the opposite of clean is, dirty food, but nobody says the word dirty food. I don't know. We have these cheat foods. We have lots of things that we're, quote, not allowed or shouldn't have. All that language, if you find yourself using those words, I shouldn't, I can't, I am not supposed to, I'm not allowed, all those terms are basically the, sort of colloquial of diet culture. And even if you're not on a capital D branded diet, if you're making food decisions with those words and those word choices, that's, whether you're saying it out loud or you're saying it to yourself in your head, you're still restricting. You're still in deep with the diet culture. So we need to change that conversation that we're having with our, internal dialogue. The beliefs we have about eating, we've got to change that, because that's what's causing the stress response. And like I said, the stress response is physiologic. So when that happens, it happens. And when you have cortisol and adrenaline and all these other hormones, you're going to have a preoccupation with food. You're going to have a laser focused preoccupation with high energy, rapidly digestible foods, which guess what that is? Simple starches and sugars. Interesting. You're going to have lots of cravings. You're going to have this labile mood, and your body really is just looking for the quickest fix to sort of solve the problem. But what we want our bodies to think is that we're not in a problem. We're not in a situation that needs a fight or flight response. We don't need that hormonal dysregulation every single time we're making a decision about eating. I mean, we're not cavemen. We go shop at the grocery store. We have food in our desks and our purses and our cars. We are surrounded by food. But the thing is, your body, your endocrine system doesn't know the difference. Your adrenal gland doesn't have like a opinion about the food industry. It's just built to do something. So that's really important. So we can't change the stress, but we can change the impact of the stress response by changing our beliefs. It is all about thinking, all about thinking. And there's another study that I read, and if I can find where I saw it, I will put it in the notes. I can't promise I'll do that. I'm going to try to find it though. There's a study where they had people that considered themselves emotional eaters and had a really, in their mind, perceive a big problem with eating related to feelings and out of control stress response. And then they had people that said they don't have as much of a problem. They were sort of non-emotional eaters. And the thing is that the emotional eaters when they were eating the exact same foods, the exact same food choices, they fed both these groups like the same actual food items, and then measured their cortisol level and their, adrenaline and blood sugar and all these things by drawing blood on them. And the people that had labeled themselves as emotional eaters had a higher level of all these sort of blood chemistries. And that was obviously not because of what they consumed, because the two groups consumed the same thing. It was the fact that they had all these emotions and beliefs superimposed on the food. So what we need to do is change our beliefs. And so instead of saying, I eat too many bad foods, I'm addicted to bad foods or junk food, how about saying something like foods are neutral? And we have to sit with something that's either neutral, or if you can come up with a positive belief to replace it, that's great. But a lot of people, that's too big of a leap. And just coming up with something neutral that's not negative is enough. So, instead of saying junk food, health food, why don't we just say foods are neutral? Okay. The shaming and your body negativity, that internalized fat phobia, like, let's think about our body as assets. Let's say that health is possible at every size, okay? It doesn't mean every person is healthy, but it means that health is possible independent of size. And that's a whole other conversation that I had a podcast about. Saying that you're not good enough to do whatever or be whatever until you lose weight, then let's replace that with saying I have worth and value right now, and shrinking my body is not going to change my potential. Your body is not to be trusted. You don't know what you're doing. That's a diet culture belief, that you don't know and they know better. That's essentially the message that they give you. Well, let's just trust that our body knows what it's doing and that we were designed this way for a reason. And I say this all the time, whether you're a believer in divine creation, or whether you just believe in really, really solid engineering, the human body is designed to work. The default condition is health. It has to be. We wouldn't survive any other way. So knowing that that's what's going on will help you sort of come to terms with the idea that working with your body is going to get you a lot farther than making your body and making sort of food the enemy. Because your body's doing the right thing. I promise your body's doing the right thing. And ability to do the right thing is totally independent of your, number one, interest in learning about it, number two, understanding of what's going on, or three, your belief in it. It's really a non-negotiable. Human physiology is essentially a non-negotiable. So the diet culture doesn't want to admit that, though. Honestly, their whole, platform is selling you the idea that you can't do this, your body can't do this, and they can. So let me just, make crystal clear for a moment here that I'm not against anybody who's dieting. I know many, many people who are swept up in these ideas of quick fixes and kind of overhauling and detoxing and all this stuff that diet culture tells you need to do to be in optimal health. I'm not against any of the people participating. I believe in autonomy, and if you choose to participate in those things, then that's your choice. But here's what I want to make sure you understand, and that the message is crystal clear for all of you listening. Diet culture is a business model. It's a business model that made in the United States almost 80 billion with a B dollars last year. So it's actually a pretty good business model. Turns out they know exactly what they're doing. They can market you something that has only a less than 2% success rate. You'll do it. When it doesn't work, you'll do it again. I mean, there's no other product on the market that you would buy 98 out of 100 times when it doesn't work. But diet culture has you, believing that is the answer. It's not a healthcare system. It's not mental health support. It's not a health promoting intervention. It's not a public health maneuver. It is a business model. So just keep that in mind. And if you want to, give Noom your Visa card or whoever you're doing the diet du jour, that's fine. And I'm not judging you, but I want you to be totally clear with what it is you're purchasing and what you're participating in. The human body is like so much better and knows what it's doing, and it works all the time, and it's fun to understand it. And you already own one. You don't have to pay anybody to learn about these things. So anyway, what we want to do is change, I want to try to summarize this for you, but we want to change our limited mindset of misunderstanding, this guilt and shame around eating, this obedience to the diet culture, the insecurity we feel with our capacity to make food decisions. We want to change all that. The solution is changing our thoughts. The solution to stress eating and eating stress, which is where this whole episode started, is to change our thoughts. And we can change that insecurity into confidence and a growth mindset. We can change that misunderstanding into knowledge. And there's clarity and information for you out there. This is one place. I am one source, but there is buku tons of things for you to learn that are based in evidence, that are true, that will help you move forward with your understanding and acceptance of these things. And speaking of acceptance, you have to start accepting yourself and your body, that your body is trying to do the right thing. Your worth as a human is not a function of your shape, your size, your color, your ability level. You're not a function of your conformity to a diet, your food choices. You have so much more value. And when you can take away that pressure, 3, 4, 5 times a day of just totally consuming ourselves with thoughts about eating and body checking and planning, you'll enjoy your life so much more. That's really what I do, is I grant people freedom to pursue their own life, whatever that looks like to you. And there's a, billion different versions of that, but we want you to have the autonomy to make decisions for yourself and know that it's possible to change your beliefs about eating. So, this is the way you fix stress eating is not a bunch of tricks. If you go Google, stress eating hacks or stress eating tips or tricks or whatever, they'll tell you all this bogus stuff. Like, you should take a nap. If you're feeling stressed and want to eat, you should chew gum or drink black coffee or eat, what do they call celery? Like a calorie negative food or something. That is just asinine. But, there's these foods that they tell you are like more calories to chew than they are to, I don't even understand that. But drink water, go for a walk, all these things, when really what we need to do is honor our desire to eat and learn to process, our emotions, kind of develop our emotional intelligence around these things, control the things we can control, which is going to be our thoughts and our belief system. That stress response, when that happens, you can't change. But, what happens when you eat in response to stress is not that big a deal. Where it becomes a big deal is when you just destroy yourself by having more emotions and more stress because you ate. And then that stress makes you eat more. And then eating more makes you have more stress. And then you see how this just gets out of hand so quickly. And to think that your body and your mind are going through this, several times a day for so many people, it's really just becomes a way of life. And therefore your body is always perched on that edge of total meltdown because of the stress that you're always feeling about eating. So I want to help you undo that. I'd love for you to continue this conversation with me in, a message or an email. If you're interested in joining my community, these are the kinds of things we talk about on a regular basis. And I have a membership community that, you certainly can participate in. But if that's not something you want to commit to, just listen to this podcast, fill your social media feed with people like me who are doing the good work to make eating normal, make people accept their ability to find health without this, the sales pitch of dieting, without these hacks and quick fixes. We want you to be able to enjoy food, be around food, feel like you have control and, contentment, and then just get on with it and not be so totally consumed. So I am so thankful you've chosen to spend this half hour with me learning about stress eating. Please let me know how I can help you. I'd love for you to stay here with me and come back next time. My episodes are new every Wednesday, and I really appreciate if you are able to leave a review and a rating on your podcast platform. That is not just my vain cry for acknowledgement. I really, really want this message to move forward and for other people to hear it, because I think it's so important. And the way that my podcast will be seen and put forth into the world is by more people leaving reviews and ratings. So I really appreciate that if you take just a moment to do that. And thank you so much for joining me today. We will talk next time. Thank you so much for being here today. If you love what you've learned, follow me on social media at Maggie Landes MD, and you'll never miss a thing. You can also check out my website at maggielandesmd.com and sign up to be part of our community of eaters. Thanks again for stopping by. We'll talk again soon.